Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the George W. Bush Presidential Center, Ken Hirsch.
Good evening and welcome to another sold-out Engage event, and welcome to the folks who are listening on Facebook Live. Now that most of our brackets are already busted, we can all enjoy the evening tonight, especially here on the SMU campus. I know my brackets died a couple days ago. This program is the kind of program we want to bring to this great campus and this great city. It's relevant, it's informative, and it's fun. And it talks about topics that are both timely and historic all at once. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Westwood Trust, who's been a great friend of the Bush Center and the work that we do here, and also welcoming students from the Woodrow Wilson High School Theater Program, who I know will be excited for tonight's program. This is really a unique platform, what the Bush Center is able to do. A platform that carries the name of a former president allows us to access resources that other people can't access and go places that other people can't go. And we're able to bring uniqueness to the programming, both the public programming as well as the Bush Institute. And our big goal here is to continue the work that was started by President and Mrs. Bush when they were in the White House and to take on new work inspired by them. We do that consistent with their values. And their values are really quite simple, and that is political and economic freedom, less government dependency, and a strong and compassionate country here and abroad. And we engage the world, which is part of our mission, as we develop leaders and advance policy. We do that through our impact centers that you heard on the video. And tonight, it's part of our engagement agenda, and it's how we engage the public. And so thank you all for being here. It's now my pleasure to introduce a really institution in broadcast journalism today. Eric Shawn, who's a native New Yorker, has been throughout his entire career at various stages in the broadcast world. Since 1996, he's settled at Fox News, and he's covered presidents, he's covered 9/11, he's covered the United Nations, he's an author, and he's a TV personality. His wife Lisa and his son Oliver are also here tonight, so we welcome them to the Bush Center. Please join me in welcoming Eric Shawn and our esteemed panel.
Ken, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. How cool is this? I mean, Ken, thank you, and to President Bush and Mrs. Bush and all the folks at the library and the Institute, we want to thank you, and want to thank you folks for coming out. First, I'd like to ask, before we introduce everybody, and we get to the experts, how many people here have seen Hamilton on Broadway so far? A few? Okay. Okay. How many twice? Okay. All right, I'm going to get to you guys later because that's a big thing in New York now. It used to be, can you get tickets to Hamilton? Do you have tickets to Hamilton? Now it's 3 times, 6 times. Simply put, I was very lucky to see it with my wife and our son, who are here, in July of previews in 2015. We had a dear friend, Liz Oren, saw it, the public, and said, you have to see this show. And we went, and in my mind, Hamilton simply reaffirms our faith in the American experiment. It reaffirms and rejuvenates, I think, the values and the sense of this nation, of who we are, where we've been, where we're going, and it does this through Lin-Manuel's remarkable genius that is just absolutely spectacular. But enough from me. Let me start to introduce number 1, who's at 43's place. Chris Jackson, who of course plays George Washington. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Professor Joanne Freeman is at Yale University and has studied Alexander Hamilton for 35 years. So we will be delving into that. And Alex Horwitz, of course, is the producer-director of the wonderful documentary on PBS, Hamilton in America. We'll be showing clips this evening. We know the phenomenon, and you can't get tickets now. I went on the computer a couple of months ago, and you keep on pushing the date, and I've gone over to the theater at Fox News. My office actually overlooks the theater, the Richard Rodgers, and I see it. It's so close, but it's so far. So I go over every 4 months, and the guy at the theater says the same thing to me. We don't have any tickets. It's like a Jackie Mason routine. We've got tickets, you can't have any tickets. But if you're lucky enough to get them, I would suggest go on StubHub, go on the online to do that, and you are in for such a fantastic treat. But it was never what we know it as it is now. At the beginning, it was an idea. Chris, tell me first, when you first heard about this, you knew Lin-Manuel, you worked together. What did he say? How did it start?
We were in the midst of a performance of his first Broadway show, In the Heights. You guys are familiar with In the Heights? There was a moment in the performance every show where his character and my character would retreat into the little corner store that his character ran. And he looks over at me, he says, he'd just gotten back from vacation, he says, I think I got my next thing. I was like, great, what is it? Is there a part for me? But he essentially said, it's about the Treasury Secretary. What? And before he could answer, we had to go back out on stage and finish a big number of the first act. So several days later, he expounded on that a little bit. He said, it's about Alexander Hamilton. And I, like pretty much most of America, everyone in the room except for this learned individual next to me, says, Alexander Hamilton, yeah, got shot. That's all I knew about him.
$10 bill.
There it is. I don't even know if I came up with that much at that point. And then a couple of days after that, as I was walking to my dressing room, Thomas Cale, who collaborated with Lin and directed the Hamilton production, said, G-dubs. I said, G-dubs? G-dubs, just G-dubs. What? George Washington. I said, George Washington. What? Why George Washington? He said, we want you to be George Washington in the thing that Lin's writing. I said, oh, okay. And I ran out that evening after getting a little more information and found out that Ron Chernow had written a book about George Washington, better than the Hamilton book, sorry. President to offend anyone, won the Pulitzer for it, I'm just saying. Grabbed that up and started exploring who the character was.
When he said dubs, G-dubs, what did you think?
I think that's shorthand for something. I just didn't know what it was. G-W, G-dubs, George Washington, yeah.
We have a clip. Let's start the first clip from the documentary that shows the very beginnings of how it happened.
I grabbed a biography off the shelf of Alexander Hamilton because I wanted a big fat book to read on vacation, and I found it deeply moving and deeply personal when I read it. It was just such a compelling ride.
Lin invited me to In the Heights, and I went backstage, and he said, Ron, I was reading the book, and hip-hop songs started rising off the page. And I said to him, really?
I said, this is Tupac, this is Biggie, this is a hip-hop story. This is my next show. So who's Alexander Hamilton? Besides being the dude on the 10, the best-looking founding father. He was George Washington's chief of staff during the Revolutionary War, and he was our first Treasury Secretary. But before that, he was an immigrant. He was born in the Caribbean. But he came to our country and, by sheer force of will and intellect, changed our country forever.
I don't even really know if I knew who Alexander Hamilton was. I know he was on our currency.
Alexander Hamilton is one of the unsung heroes of our country.
Yeah, well, that's the way history works. Sometimes it takes a while for people to
Give you credit.
Well, I'm waiting for the hip-hop version of George W. Bush. So
G-double-dubs.
yeah, that's G.W. Dubs, exactly. Hamilton, hip-hop, rap, when you heard that there was going to be a play, and then you heard what it was, what was your reaction?
Well, mostly my reaction was, oh my gosh, this will never happen again. I mean, I've been studying Hamilton forever, right? And no one knew who he was. They knew maybe shot, maybe not. Maybe $10 bill was all they knew. So when I heard this was happening, I was beyond excited, but I also thought, I got to find my way to this thing, right? I have to find wherever this thing is and sort of beam into it, because I couldn't quite believe it's a play about Hamilton, a musical about Hamilton, in hip hop, and yeah. So it didn't matter to me if it was good. It didn't matter to me if it was going to be bad. I was going to be like sitting in the front row going, I'm having a Hamilton moment.
And you have an incredible collection of Hamilton letters and work, and you wanted to get that to Lin-Manuel.
Well, right. So I knew that he was working on this, and I knew it was going to be based on Ron Chernow's biography. And I thought, well, since this is the only time there's going to be a rap musical about Alexander Hamilton in my life, I want Hamilton's real words to be in the show. So my goal was to give him a copy of a collection I edited of Hamilton's letters, just in the hope that some of Hamilton's actual words would get in the show. This would be Hamilton's big break, to have his actual words be out in the public.
And of course it is. So when you see the show, those are the letters.
I pick out all the words. I know the letters. I can pick out all the lines. And there's a remarkable number of letters that are either cited or quoted in the play.
We will get to the letters and the meaning of Alexander Hamilton a little later on in our program. Alex, you kind of have an inside track. You went to Wesleyan with Lynn. Tell me about the beginning of the documentary, because I think one of the most remarkable parts of this, as I said before, it starts in their new apartment. If anyone has seen it, it opens up basically in Lin-Manuel's unrenovated Washington Heights apartment, which of course, being a film student, metaphor for the production. How did it start? How did you know to begin that and to start the project for the documentary?
I'd love to claim some genius, and some people have said to me, oh, you knew before everyone else it was going to be a hit, which is absurd. No one can predict these things. I didn't care if it was going to be a hit, frankly. When Lynn first started, he thought concept album, maybe a show. He wasn't sure. It was just a collection of songs. It was an idea. And I said to him, exploiting our friendship, because I was roommates with him at college, so I was just around listening to the demos. I said, look, these are extraordinary. I don't care what you're making, frankly. Let me just start rolling as you do it. It became clear pretty early on he was making a show. But honestly, the show could have failed in some alternate universe. And I think we still would have had a very compelling lens on history. I told Lynn from the beginning, I don't want to make a behind-the-scenes documentary of how a musical's made. We've all seen that documentary. It's been done very well. And frankly, that only appeals to musical theater fans. We could use this as a teachable moment, a lens on history, you and a young, dynamic cast as our guides to history. It's a different kind of history documentary than I'd seen before. So we brought in Joanne Freeman and Ron Chernow. We got President Bush and high officials on both sides of the aisle just talking about history. So it's this nice mix of pop culture and history together to tell this one life story of Alexander Hamilton, which is the main story of the film.
So the goal, I mean, obviously the goal when you see the documentary is, as you say, to teach Hamilton, not just the musical behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, Lynn and I said, I said to Lynn early on, I said, look, you're doing something incredible. My documentary, which I'm very proud of, is a shadow of the greater work, which is Hamilton. I'm very happy for it to just be the companion piece. But I did say to Lynn, look, we can do things that even you in the show can't do. I can take you out to Hamilton's home and put it on film. I can take Chris and others out to Valley Forge. We can actually get the sort of sense memory of these things, the actual visuals, just because that's what we can do in film and you can't do on a Broadway stage. So we can make these, as I said before, this companion piece, this sort of visual compendium to go along with it, to get commentary from presidents and historians. And that was the goal, to just add some education into the fun of it.
We'll talk about that in a second. We all know the phenomenon that it is now. They were all at the very beginning. We have another clip in which Lin-Manuel discusses the phenomenon. As he puts it, our show opened and everyone freaked out. Here's the clip.
It's called Hamilton. It's about Alexander Hamilton. And it was at the Public Theater. Tariq, you saw it too, right? Quest, you saw it?
Yeah.
How amazing is this play?
It's life-changing.
After the first two songs, I looked to my wife and we were like, this might be the greatest thing, like,
we've ever seen, ever. And you kind of look around and other people saying, like, are we right? Like, this is the best thing that's right. We're all on the same, but you can't say that because people are acting and performing, but you're almost in tears.
We sell out our extensions as quickly as they go on sale, and the decision is made pretty quickly. We're going to Broadway.
On Sunday, tickets go on sale for Broadway, Hamilton, Richard Rodgers Theater. Be there. Thank you for coming this afternoon.
Our show opened on Tuesday and the world blew up. This is crazy. I don't know what the future holds. I know that our show opened and everyone freaked out. That's where we're at.
Freedom for America, freedom for France!
Gotta start a new nation, gotta meet my son.
We won! We won! We won! The world turned upside down.
Well, that Sunday that Lin-Manuel talks about, I anchor on Fox News on the weekends, and I anchor a show from 12 to 1. And that was the Sunday, the first day they had tickets for sale. So between my newscasts, I walked over and bought tickets. Dope. I could have bought tons of tickets. There were 2 people online at that time. The phenomenon, the way this took off, you must be so touched. It's so emotional. It has struck such a chord with people who see it on so many levels. Did anyone expect this?
No.
In a word.
In a word, no. Hamilton was is my 7th Broadway show. I've seen some big shows. I've been part of the original company of Lion King. I was in the Heights. This, as I was saying backstage, Hamilton has also happened in a moment in our collective lives where the internet is the internet and Twitter is Twitter, and Broadway no longer exists in a very small, neighborhood in New York City. It is accessible. I was a young man discovering theater, discovering acting in Southern Illinois. I had been to 1 stage production in my entire life, and yet I had a bug. I wanted to try it, and it took me to New York. I literally walked out of the stage door one day and met a young lady who had traveled from the Philippines for 1 day to see our show. And she was getting back on a plane to go back to Manila, and that with her friend. And that is crazy to me, but that is the draw of not just our show, but Broadway in general. There's access that has never been there until this time in this moment in history where it's just accessible. And I think that has contributed to the reach of Hamilton and the enthusiasm that continues to just sort of well up. It's a word of mouth show. I've never been in a show that has advertised less than Hamilton.
You're right.
Why spend $2 million a weekend and taking out a full page ad in the Times? There's no need. You can't buy tickets anyway, So it kind of makes sense. But that is the beauty of that, is that it is something that people have taken for themselves and felt compelled to share and compelled to reach out for.
The beauty is the appeal. At the preview that we went to, it shows both sides. Georgette Mossbacher, the Republican fundraiser, was there, and down the aisle to the left was David Axelrod, who of course is President Obama's campaign official. And in New York now, you get all these stories. A friend of mine a few months ago said, oh, my friend was at Hamilton the other night. Guess who we were sitting next to? Who? Alan Greenspan.
Yeah?
And Alan Greenspan was crying. It is such a powerful, think of that for a moment. What a powerful work of art. It made Alan Greenspan cry. So Joanne, when you first were involved with Lin, did you expect it to take off like this? Did you expect it to reach such heights? And why do you think it has touched such a nerve and has really been incorporated in our lives?
I mean, as everyone has said, there's no way I saw it and thought it was amazing, and even so, could not have imagined it did what it did. When I first saw it at the Public Theater, there were a lot of historians in the audience because, of course, we were the ones that were like, woohoo, the play about Hamilton. And I saw a high school history teacher crying, actually crying at Washington's farewell address, because she couldn't believe that it was in a play. She couldn't believe it was in a play. So there were a lot of history teachers and historians in the audience who were amazed and touched by it. But you know, in my early conversations with Lynn when it was still at the Public Theater, mostly for me it was just fun because he wanted to talk about Hamilton and he wanted to talk about Hamilton as a person, which is endlessly fun to talk about, and he's endlessly complicated and troubled and troublemaker and problematic in all kinds of ways. So we would have these great conversations where we would just be, you know, and then, you know what he did then? You won't believe it. You know, so it was just more, for me, again, this sort of weird, surreal moment when this guy who I'd been reading about and studying about for 35 years and no one knew who he was in this play, and then I was like having these great like coffee conversations with this guy who was putting him in a play.
And Alex, you started filming then. When did you realize it became or would become what it did?
It's hard to pick one moment. When they started printing Hamilton's socks, it was an indicator.
That's right. Can you show those? Yeah. That's right.
I am a history nerd, but I don't wear it on my sleeve. I wear it on my ankles.
On your ankle.
There's not one moment for me as an observer, and I did have some very privileged access to be a fly on the wall for it all. If I had to pick one, I'd just say the cover of the Rolling Stone. Because like, when was the last time a Broadway show was on the Rolling Stone? And then the album went platinum, defying all odds and all traditional economics.
What does that mean? Is it how many copies?
How many copies is platinum, Chris?
1 million.
1 million.
It's also harder to reach platinum now because of online streaming. So it's an even higher standard now. It used to be, and by the way, the album just recently went triple platinum. The last time an album had this kind of reach was Camelot, but it's many times eclipsed that performance since then. I mean, that is a kind of reach that Broadway has not enjoyed in many, many decades. And yeah, so to pick one moment would be hard.
You know, it breaks the mold, and I've talked to musical people. I know, Chris, you would say this. The touchstones of American theater, Oklahoma, West Side Story, you mentioned Camelot. This breaks all these other rules and reaches so far beyond any of that, which is one reason why I think it's so popular. I wanted to ask a show of hands of people who have not seen the show, but you know the music. You play it all the time. And that is...
Wait, that's fewer than have seen the show. That math is wrong.
But that's a fascinating phenomenon because people know the lyrics, you know the music so well, even if you have not yet been able to get to the show. And you will. I mean, StubHub is the way. Or talk to Chris after our event.
He's not in the show anymore. He doesn't know anyone.
Oh, please don't. Oh, God.
Did you, like when you would go down to the deli, would the guy ask you for tickets?
No.
All right.
It was the person whose mother just got out of ICU and miraculously made a turnaround. 2 days later, ready to go see a show if I could find a ticket or two. I, at least once a month, had to post on all social media available to me, please don't ask. Just don't ask. I can't possibly fill those requests. Yeah, it became a little crazy.
Of course, you go back within a long time. We have another clip about the concept and the beginning of the show, so I'll have Lane run this clip.
For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow, and I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot.
I write everywhere. I write on trains. I write wherever I can. And sometimes, a couple of days, I've written in Aaron Burr's bedroom. It's pretty amazing to be in the space where he was in the later part of his life. Talk about artist in residence, literally. This is my Hamilton writing desk. I sit here, I sit on the floor. I don't sit on the colonial furniture. Keep shooting off at the mouth. There's a song in the show called My Shot, and it's Hamilton's big sort of I Want song. It's the second song in the show. we see him make his group of friends, the Marquis de Lafayette, John Lawrence, Hercules Mulligan, and Aaron Burr, who is a colleague and a friend. And I'm sort of putting him into the song because these are guys who are oil and water, but they come up together. They're revolutionaries together, they're soldiers together, they're lawyers together, they're elected officials together, and at some point, one shoots the other. A lot of the revising process is continuing to check in on that relationship. It is the most important relationship in the show. So right now I'm working on lyrics, working Burr into the second song in the show. There's a section where they're doing shots and saying what they would do with their shot. So Lafayette, whose command of English is not so great, goes, with my shot, I dream of life without monarchy. Something stress in France will lead to anarchy.
Anarchy. How you say? It's all anarchy. When I fight, I make the other side panicky with my shot.
And then Hercules Mulligan, who was a tailor's apprentice, says, my shot, yo, I'm a tailor's apprentice, and I got young knuckleheads and local parentis.
I'm joining a rebellion, because I know what's my chance to socially advance. Instead of sewing some pants, I'm gonna take a shot.
And then Lawrence, who is a fierce abolitionist, goes, but we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me.
You and I do or die. Wait till I sally in on a stallion with the first black battalion of another shot.
And so now I'm working on Burr, sort of jumping in on this, going, geniuses, lower your voices. If you keep out of trouble, then you double your choices. Shooting off at the mouth, shooting from the hip, shooting the shit, to shit is something shooty, shot. And I haven't figured out how it works yet.
Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices. I'm with you, but the situation is fraught. You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot.
And then Hamilton comes in and, as was his genius, synthesizes it all.
Bird, check what we got. Mr. Lafayette, hard rock like Lancelot. I think your pants look hot. Lawrence, I like you a lot. Let's hatch a plot. Blacker than the kettle calling the pot. What are the odds the gods would put us all in one spot? Populous, wild, and conventional wisdom, like it or not. A bunch of revolutionary manumission abolitionists.
Give me your position, show me where the ammunition is. And then I want him to sort of stun his friends into silence.
Oh, am I talking too loud? Sometimes I get overexcited, shoot off at the mouth. I never had a group of friends before. I promise that I'll make y'all proud.
A beat of silence, and Lawrence goes, let's get this guy in front of a crowd. And then we go into the chorus.
And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey, you want to slap my country and I'm scrappy and hungry and I'm not throwing away my shot. We gon' rise up, time to take a shot. We gon' rise up, time to take a shot. We gon' rise up, time to take a shot. Rise up, time to take a shot. Rise up, time to take a shot. Take a shot, shot. It's time to take a shot, take a shot. And I am not throwing away my shot.
Wow. It's a good show.
The energy, the brilliance, the overpowering of that score and that song. And Alex, one of the great parts of the documentary is you go behind the scenes. I talk about showing the apartment, but you vividly show the creative process. I mean, imagine he's in the Morris Jamal, mansion. Was Aaron Burr's home. It's in Upper Manhattan. You also have Hamilton Grange. So if anyone comes to New York, absolutely visit Hamilton Grange, which was Hamilton's home. How did you do that? The process of showing the creation of this production on film?
Well, most credit is due to Lynn. You know, it's footage like that is not, I don't know about unprecedented in documentary filming, but it is rare. We've all seen the kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 rehearsal film. That's the one Lynn and I did not want to make. We've seen a lot of behind the scenes of movies. We've seen those things. But the writing process is difficult to make cinematic because, first of all, writers tend to be, it's more of a private act for them, but also it's not a very cinematic act. It's, you know. But Lynn's personality is one that makes it accessible, that makes it cinematic. He takes us through it. We also did things editorially. We could go, there's the kernel of a scene, and then, as you saw, we cut back and forth between writing and the finished product. So we made it into this nice piece. But that's because Lin let us in, and I don't take it for granted that he did. But always, like I said, he's taking us through it in historical context, not, oh, I think this is more musically interesting, or this is how a show comes together, but what were these characters going through? What's the psychology of that man or woman at that moment in history? That was the angle for the film, and he was very happy to take us through the music that way. And when he told me very early on, it was 2 years before they opened on Broadway, hey, the Morris Trail Mansion, that house where my dad throws family birthday parties? I said, yeah, it was Aaron Burr's bedroom upstairs, right? Yeah, oh, I write in there some days. I said, next time you go, tell me I'm taking a camera. So the first days of the film, him in the bare apartment, it was, me texting him, hey, can we film this weekend? It was as low-key as that.
And there's another scene where you're with Alex McElroy, and they're in the kitchen. I mean, can you imagine this incredible creation was created in the kitchen?
Yeah.
He's got the portable...
he has a keyboard right out there. And I told him very, very early on, like, I want those to be real working meetings. Like, don't stage it for me. Let me know when you're going to do it. But that's actually them working on the show that you can see in the full doc. And I should mention before we forget, because I get the question all the time, how can I see the full documentary? Yeah. The only way it is technically available right now is to pay for PBS Passport, which is their premium streaming service. You can see it that way. One day we hope for there to be a wider distribution platform like a Netflix or an Amazon. It's possible. I mention that only in theory, that we have no deal there or anything. I'm just saying those places of the world are on the table for a future date for reasons I won't bore you with now. It's all just, it needs to be revisited a couple years from now.
And Joanne, in terms of the creative process, you send him the letters. Then what happens is you show up at the door rapping? How do it work?
No. I handed him this book, and then years went by. Wow. And then I went to see the show, and sat there and recognized in the show little bits of my work, and contacted him again, saying, hey, look, like, you did the show, like, there's the show, and sort of reconnected with him at that point.
And Chris, we talk about, what's it like to work with him? I mean, he'd bounce things off you. I know he said he was going to a birthday party in the subway, and a song came in his head, and he took the subway back home to write.
I heard all those stories years before he said them in the movie. So it's really interesting. There's not a lot of consultation in terms of what Lin asks of me during the process. The benefit of his genius and my ability to interpret what he gives me to interpret is that he knows me so well. He knows he knows what he likes to hear from my voice. He knows what type of cadence I prefer to rap in. He knows the range in which where my sweet spot is. Like some hitters like a ball low and inside. Like, he knows exactly where from a performance standpoint, where I like to live. And so there's an implicit trust that exists between he and I. When he writes something, I believe it. I don't have to question it. Generally, the questions come, how do I wrap my mind around it? How do I access the material? But he always does such an amazing job of just laying it out there for me. And then, a lot of credit goes to Tommy Kail, who is the ultimate translator for Lin's work. And I often say, I don't get sheet music for Lin material. He gives me a page of lyrics, he gives me a demo, and I know intuitively where he's going, and it's easy for me to go where he's going.
So you see the words, and he sends you music?
He'll usually send me really crazy-sounding demos of him singing the song. But Lin and I have performed thousands of shows together. There's no one that I've performed with more. There's no one that I have more of a deeper rapport with. And as an artist working with a writer, I always trust where he wants me to go. So that alleviates 80% of the problems that most actors have in terms of like accessing material from a...
You have such a strong and powerful stage presence as George Washington. We're going to look at Here Comes the General for a moment, a clip of Chris's song, which you can understand why Lin-Manuel thought of this man for this part immediately. Lane, let's take a look when the general comes on stage.
Here comes the general. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the general. The moment you've been waiting for. Here comes the general. Pride of Mount Vernon. Here comes the general. George Washington. We are outgunned. What?
songs.
On the contrary, I called you here because our odds are beyond scary. Your reputation precedes you, but I have to laugh.
Sir?
Hamilton, how come no one can get you on their staff?
Sir.
Don't get me wrong, you're a young man of great renown. I know you stole British cannons when we were still downtown. Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox wanted to hire you.
Yeah, to be their secretary. I don't think so.
Now why are you upset?
I'm not.
It's all right, you want to fight, you've got a hunger. I was just like you when I was younger. Head full of fantasies of dying like a martyr.
Yes.
Dying is easy, young man, living is harder.
I write to Congress and tell them you need supplies. You rally the guys, master the element of surprise. Rise above my station, organize your information till we rise to the occasion of our new nation, sir. Here comes the general. Rise up. What? Here comes the general. Rise up. What? Here comes the general. Rise up. What? Here comes the general.
What? And his right-hand man. Ooh.
How did you prepare for that and the relationship between the two?
I give a great deal of credit to this man to my left here. Being able to step into a building that Washington moved in, lived in, commanded soldiers to die in, going to his home in Mount Vernon, seeing that vista that he longed for every day while he was away. Being able to see the things that were important to him helped me understand why they were important to him. Washington is one of those characters that we think we know a lot about until we get into the weeds and you realize that there was a real human being. It wasn't just names and dates and events. And you know, Lynn's narrative, the narrative that he gave me for Washington, most of the significant events of Washington's life happened in between the events of in between his interactions with Hamilton. And so my approach to the role every night was that I had to have a very specific understanding of what was carrying him from one moment to the next, and allowing that to guide the interaction that I had with Hamilton. And it created a really dense and troubling and difficult fabric, you know, and narrative to maintain every single show. But it's what made I think the experience worth the doing.
Just spectacular. I'm going to get back to one point of one of your visits in a moment. But Joanne, let me ask you about the relationship. Your insight into the Hamilton-President Washington relationship.
Oh, it's a fascinating relationship, right? I mean, it's a challenging relationship. I think Washington was a very patient person with Hamilton because I think Hamilton was trying, you know, and there were a number of times in which Hamilton did something where he should not have done it, and Washington really was kind of forgiving. There are these two amazing letters. So the two of them are side by side and really get to know each other and trust each other during the war, which then has a big impact on what comes later. But again, Hamilton's not an easy guy. And there are these two letters. The two of them have a big fight towards the end of the war, not quite, but a big fight towards the end of the war. And Hamilton writes these two letters. He writes one to his father-in-law, in which he's trying to explain to his father-in-law why he just had a big fight with George Washington, and he's trying to explain it away. You know, so it's okay, and it's not so bad, and he's trying to make it look nice. And then there's another letter he writes to a buddy of his, in which he says, Washington's going to repent this time. He's going to repent. He's going to be sorry. You know, so it's a fraught relationship. It's a fascinating relationship because, as you were sort of suggesting a moment ago, it's tangled and it's emotional, and they each sort of relied on the other in some ways, and it shifts and changes throughout their lives in a number of different ways. And Washington was vital. I mean, if Washington weren't there, Hamilton would have done more stupid things more quickly. But Washington kind of, you know, kept him a little bit, yeah.
And there was a surrogate father-son thing going on there, right?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I would say
it's been overstated.
It has been overstated. I would say yes, only because Hamilton has issues with authority figures,
right?
And so certainly some of that must have been
fatherless child. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love Lynn, and Lynn loves me. He'd be brilliant whether I showed up or not. But I would never tell him that. I would tell him that his success is directly correlated with the fact that I've been involved in his two most important shows. And when are we starting on the next one?
We're live streamed. He heard all of that.
I hope so. He's shooting right now in London, so I'm hoping that he's actually awake and can see that. I love you, bro.
Yeah, it's only not even 1 in the morning in London
Hey.
at the moment. Good. You mentioned visiting the sites, and that must have been really an amazing personal experience. We have a clip now of Mount Vernon, in which Chris is in the documentary visiting where George Washington lived and worked. We'll play that.
Alexander Hamilton, as Treasury Secretary, was deputy president in many ways.
Hamilton has to create much of the federal government from scratch. First budget systems, first tax systems, first customs service, first Coast Guard, first monetary policy, first central bank, which was the direct forerunner of the Federal Reserve.
Hamilton created financial instruments that enabled people to trade and therefore facilitate the movement of capital.
While Hamilton was Treasury Secretary, there were only 5 securities traded on Wall Street. 3 of them were Treasury securities created by Alexander Hamilton. The 4th was the stock of the Bank of New York, created by Alexander Hamilton. The 5th was the stock of our first central bank, created by, you know who, Alexander Hamilton.
I look at Alexander Hamilton as the patron saint of Wall Street.
We're on the floor. This is, we're living in Hamilton's world here.
It's true. And, you know, as I was coming down to meet you this morning, I got the chills. When you're actually here and you just visualize what was taking place 200 years ago, it's quite extraordinary.
Hamilton is picturing this robust, strong central government that is the engine of finance and engine of democracy and unites our states. Jefferson is picturing this agrarian paradise where farmers are left alone and do their thing.
One could say that Jefferson could represent the populist interests at the time, the small farmer, the people living out in the country. But were they forecasting a philosophical divide that run throughout a political system? Absolutely.
So we're in the mansion's dining room, and it's set for the 1790 dinner party of George Washington and his cabinet.
It's set for that now?
It is set for that. Just if they walked in right now, they would be ready.
A lot of people don't know that the fight over the debt plan and establishing a national bank, it happened here.
The issue on the table, Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt and establish a national bank. Secretary Jefferson, you have the floor, sir.
Ow, but Hamilton forgets. His plan would have the government assume states' debts. Now place your bets as to who that benefits. The very seat of government where Hamilton sits.
Not true.
Ooh, if the shoe fits, wear it. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Our debts are paid, I'm afraid. Don't tax the South, cause we got it made in the shade.
You assume the debts the union gets, a new line of credit, a financial diuretic. How do you not get it? If we're aggressive and competitive, the union gets a boost. You'd rather give it a sedative? Hey, turn around, bend over. I'll show you where my shoe fits. Alexander. Madison, Jefferson, take a walk. Hamilton, take a walk.
Not many people know about the New York Stock Exchange's controversial decision to move the trading floor to Virginia, Mount Vernon. We mixed up.
They would believe
That was not Chris at Mount Vernon. To be clear, we're like cruising through. That was like highlights from the documentary. Cruising through. But, yeah.
I misspoke for a second. We'll get to the meaning of Hamilton in a moment and how it relates to today, but I wanted to pick up with Chris on visiting Mount Vernon. You've done something maybe many people know or don't know, that you started to bow your head at as George Washington because of his slaveholding history. What prompted you to do that, and what are your thoughts?
So one of the difficult parts in the as I was wrapping my head around the very obvious question, I don't know if you guys know this, but most of the presidents in our show are black. Spoiler alert. Very early on, the conceit of how we were telling the story was clear. But there's that you still have to draw some sort of thread in terms of how you personally can relate to whatever character you're playing. And as I would like to think a semi-enlightened man of my time, I don't look back on that age as in complete reverie of how brilliant our founding fathers were. Our country got started off on a pretty, difficult ledge, and rather than face it, we kicked it down the road, which is how we address it in our show. George Washington was a brilliant, vital part. If he was not who he was when he was, I sometimes doubt whether or not we'd be sitting here right now. That's my personal feeling about it. But the man owned people. And he owned people that looked like me. And so, as an actor, it isn't always it's not always our job to right the wrongs of history. It's not always our job to necessarily understand the complete complexity of a different time. But I needed to come to terms with the understanding that that was an aspect of, a literal aspect of the character that I was playing. When we visited Mount Vernon, Alex afforded me the opportunity to approach it on my own terms. And it was a trip meant for discovery and meant for taking the time to explore all of the aspects of this man's life. And, in 18th century America, there's no escaping the very real presence of slavery. I commend all of the Founding Fathers' estates. You can see them. They have done such a great job of incorporating that narrative as well as it's as important as the very existence of the property itself. And so I went to the slave quarters. I walked in the same footsteps of the people that he trusted, by the way, to maintain his homestead, his wealth, his life, and got to spend some time there. I also laid a wreath at his tomb. I got to stand in his study. How that then is incorporated into the show, at the very end of the show, Eliza, makes this declaration that she fought for the Washington Monument, for to raise money for it to be started, for ground to be broken. And the very next line, she says, "I speak out against slavery as I have stood there in realizing the majesty of what the Washington Monument and that lasting impression, and also being able to acknowledge that I didn't get it all right. I didn't, as Washington, we didn't get everything right. In fact, it's a great stain on our legacy as a country, and yet you can acknowledge it, and yet here we are." And that came from Tommy Kail, and by giving me that last kernel, that was the last little puzzle piece that allowed me to fully embrace who I was playing, this character of George Washington that I was playing, and to this day it lives in the show as a testament to being honest about the story that you're telling. I think it's about honest storytelling and getting to it the best way you know how.
It carries on in the show with the succeeding actors. Joanne, as the historian, how does one reconcile that? How does the show then deal with that? As Chris says, it is dealt with, especially with her work for 50 more years.
Right. Well, it's interesting as a historian watching the show. It's phenomenal theater. It's also musical theater. So I don't go to that show and expect history to be recited back to me. And what that show does for me is emphasize the humanity of the people that are in it, bring something of the spirit of that moment to life. There are many things that are not in the show that could be in the show. I mean, it could be a different show and confront slavery in a different way. And there's a lot of interior work that you're talking about that's going on so that it's there and it's present for you, and I think that's felt. But I guess to me, the show more than anything else is it sort of takes you along with Hamilton through his life and makes him a real person and makes that period real and kind of gets you beyond the, poor George Washington is always like this block of marble, I think, in our minds, right? I mean, it brings a humanity to the period and brings a contingency to the period so that people don't assume that the founding, well, of course it worked, and of course we got a constitution, and then of course it worked, and then of course it kept going. Well, there aren't a lot of courses, and I think that play It does all of these things really well. So to me as a historian, those are the things that I reach towards, and those are the things that I try to teach with, is, okay, so here are some ways in which we can touch base again with the fact that these are real people making mistakes, figuring things out as they go along, and let's start there, and then from there go on and delve deeper into the history that surrounds it.
And in light of the current events in our country now and the contentiousness in Washington, for example, as a work of art, does it feel different? Does it have a separate, different message than when it premiered, do you think? I mean, just as an example, the cabinet song, Cabinet Battle No. 1, when Jefferson and Hamilton, or that we just saw, are rapping and fighting over the establishment of state debt and the Capitol and the bank. I mean, that could be today Paul Ryan and, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren or something.
But I would say yes and no, right? Okay, so.
They're equally good rappers, though.
You're not taking side. You're not taking side.
It's a draw, really. Just saying.
Just saying.
God, how good would that be?
But the difference is, now I'm not going to get that image out of my head.
I mean, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. But anyway, the difference is in this time period, it's tempting, even looking back, to want to take a side, right? And I think nowadays people take a Hamilton side, right? Well, Hamilton was great and Hamilton was right and Jefferson was wrong. One of the things about this period that's most striking and representative is that if either Hamilton or Jefferson had been there, things would not have gone well. They were engaged in a dialogue. Now, it was an occasionally nasty dialogue. It was a heated dialogue. They didn't like each other very much after a while. But the fact of the matter is that one way or another, they were working together, and that the founding happened because of give and take and compromise and conversation. And that's not something we're seeing a lot of right now. That is something that's going on in that time period. And I think the show is showing, although it's showing ugliness and fighting, it's also showing engagement. And I think, obviously, we're not very focused on engagement these days.
Does it have a different feeling for you, Chris, or is it, I think in terms of, you see the fighting, you see the arguments, but they were able to accomplish the founding of this country.
I don't see a lot of arguments happening with our elected officials. I see a lot of sound bites and a lot of posturing, and I see this side talking to their people and this side talking to their people. I would love to see debates. I would love to turn on C-SPAN and see real debates. I would love to see governance. I agreed with Joanne's assessment in that, you know, politics is not a bad thing. Opposition is not the same as an enemy. I just would like to see some politicians. You know, people who are advocating on the behalf towards a common goal.
There are two, there's a Jefferson letter and a Hamilton letter about a cabinet meeting. So they're both sitting at this table. I always feel really bad for George Washington thinking about these cabinet meetings. And Jefferson is writing in this letter, like, Hamilton gave another 45-minute jury speech at this cabinet meeting, and he's like, you know, fed up to here. Hamilton says in a letter to a friend, you know, I'm sitting across from him, and anytime something doesn't go my way, I can see him smirking across the table. Now, on the one hand, you can feel that they really don't like each other. On the other hand, they're still at that table,
right, yeah,
engaged in dialogue, and Washington is there, and they're trying to figure it out. That's something to hang on to.
Yeah. Maybe we should just play the room where it happens, and then something will start happening. Alex, your thoughts?
Well, you know, one thing that we've just scratched the surface of in this documentary, I could have made a whole other film about it, is the timelessness of ugliness in political discourse. It's volatile. Sometimes it's more acrimonious than others. Joanne told me a great story when I interviewed her for the film. It's not in the film, but in the election of 1800, there were some Federalists who published false obituaries declaring Thomas Jefferson was dead.
In the middle of the election, like, tragedy!
Yeah, in the middle of the election.
Candidate has
That's
died.
dirty politics.
That's very dirty politics.
That's fake news.
That's fake news. Fake news. Fake
Very
news
fake
is not
news.
new. It's been around. That's dirty politics. Look, our vaunted founding fathers wrote some really R-rated stuff We're all grown-ups here. I want to share my favorite, and this is a quotation. I'm going to quote John Adams, second president of the United States, and I think you know the quote I'm going to give. It's one of my favorite pieces of writing by a politician. He's writing a letter, it might be to Jefferson, you know better than I do, complaining about Hamilton. And he says something like, that brash bastard son of a Scottish whore.
Bastard brat of a Scotch.
Right. That his drive and blah, 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 blah comes no doubt, and this is the part I know I've got verbatim, comes no doubt from an overabundance of secretions which he couldn't find whores enough to absorb. Not my words. Second president of the United States. That makes even 2016's revelations sound G-rated.
Yes.
I mean, so this is a long-winded way of saying that there has always been really nasty, ugly stuff in coming from our highest minds. But as Joanne said, they were still at the table together. They still got stuff done. Jefferson and Hamilton, in a very reductive way that's not fair to either, do represent, as President Bush says in the film, these sort of two poles of a spectrum of political discourse. Neither right nor wrong, absolutely, but they represent a spectrum upon which all of American history is a fight. Not between what is right and wrong, but where we need to be at any given moment, I would optimistically hope is the case. Yeah. And it adjusts. Sometimes we get things right, sometimes we get things wrong, but it's always this sort of tug, and one cannot exist without the other. And so I try in times of, I'm editorializing here, this is not part of the film or part of Hamilton, but I try in times of real volatility and ugliness in politics to remember that we're just sliding on that scale. And ultimately, I hope that's a good thing. I'm trying to take the macro view there.
Good. The Republic endures. We're beginning to run short.
So far.
So I want to, one thing that President Washington did that is part of your performance is he voluntarily stepped down, stepped away. We have a clip about that, and we'll discuss it.
Washington had an extraordinary American life. I think the most extraordinary thing he did was step down from the presidency, ensuring that this American experiment would continue without him. By modeling a peaceful transition from president to president, he puts us eons ahead of every other fledgling democracy on earth.
Teach him how to say goodbye. Washington's going home. You and I. Its eyes on you, yeah. We're gonna teach them how to say goodbye. Teach them how to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Say goodbye one last time.
Chris, please don't ever step away from the musical stage.
There are no term limits on Broadway, Chris.
Washington stepping down was a remarkable feat. Tell me about that.
He railed against factions or parties, but he was also the only president that was ever unanimously elected, so he kind of had a catbird seat. I think he got tired. I think that he got chased by the, was it Benjamin Franklin Bash who sent 2 copies of the
Oh, Freneau.
Freneau, excuse me, editorializing every day about how horrible he was. He sent 2 copies to Washington every morning, and Washington read them. And I think he was done. The man left an enduring legacy in every way. Our executive continues to follow the example that was set 250 years ago, I think. It just is. It's what the King of England said. If his leaving is true, you know, it's the most. What is the most? He'll be the most popular man or most powerful.
Greatest man in
the greatest man in the world. It is. I always tell this. It's a really interesting story. that song was always a very powerful moment for me. But it was also a moment that I could only truly experience the last time that I performed it.
Yeah, of course.
And that is the last, that is the enduring memory of the entire experience for me, to be able to live in that truth. The show was going on, and it was never greater, it was never in a better position, and I was walking away from it. And I always say that it feels like that was the little gift that Lynn gave me as a parting gift. After all that we've been through in the whole entire run, and all of the experience, the loss, the sacrifice, the triumph, all the highs, all the lows. But it was never something that I could fully understand until I left. And it was the best feeling. And I remember driving home that night and imagining what Washington must have felt like while he took that long carriage ride back to Mount Vernon. Man, it must have felt good. I felt really, really good. Just to know that you'd given the last bit that you had, and there was nothing else to say except to be grateful. And that's sort of just where I've stayed since I left.
How did you get through that song that night?
It was easier than most people assume that I would have been crying and, I can't believe I'm not doing it again. But honestly, it felt amazing because I got to tell the absolute truth in that moment. That I got to say goodbye, I got to do it on my own terms, I got to do it feeling the support and the love from, the entire cast, my family, the experience, Broadway in a larger context. And there's nothing to do but feel just full. Absolutely full and absolutely grateful.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have the final clip now, which actually addresses one of the most almost undeniable, you can't wrap your brain around the concept of dueling. So I will ask you about that with these brilliant men who would settle these scores by going out to shoot at each other. Here's that clip.
These are 18th century dueling pistols. The first thing to do is you would pick up your weapon and you would keep it vertical, and you would put some powder in, and then you would take out the rammer. You'd invert it and ram the powder down. Okay, and you would...
There's so much time to apologize.
At dawn on a July morning in 1804, traveling in separate boats, Hamilton and Burr travel up the Hudson River to Weehawken, across the Hudson River from where West 42nd Street in Manhattan is.
Hamilton had a lot of insecurities and vulnerabilities about his reputation because of his origins. Over the course of his life, 10 times he almost got involved in a duel. All of those times he negotiated his way out. And most affairs of honor, that's what happened. Unfortunately, with Burr in 1804, they don't manage to do that.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, number 10, paces fire.
And we get to his final moments. There's just him, and this bullet coming at him, and all the thoughts that can ping through his brain between that bullet leaving the gun and hitting him.
I imagine death so much it feels more like a memory. Is this where it gets me? On my feet, several feet ahead of me. I see it coming. Do I run or fire my gun or let it be? There is no beat, no melody.
He does a tally sheet. This is Hamilton. He thinks about the things he's done in his life. He thinks about the country he's leaving behind that didn't exist when he got there. He thinks about the people he's gonna see on the other side.
Lawrence leads a soldier's chorus on the other side. My son is on the other side. He's with my mother on the other side. Washington is watching from the other side. Teach me how to say goodbye. Rise up, rise up, rise up, and rise up.
And then the last moment, the snag that keeps him from going there is Eliza, because he leaves her behind with a lot. And then he does it anyway. He points his gun up at the sky in that final moment.
My love, take your time. I'll see you on the other side.
raise a glass to freedom.
Here's his pistol at the sky.
Such a searing, difficult scene that is so emotional when you see the musical. Joanne, can you explain this contradiction of these brilliant minds and dueling? And do you think that Hamilton threw the duel by moving the pistol up in the air, or that he had his glasses, that Burr thought we had his glasses because he was going to...
Okay.
Could I just say one thing before she answers this question? I just want to set the stage for you all here. Joanne Freeman wrote a book called Affairs of Honor. When Ron Chernow was researching Alexander Hamilton, his book, he interviewed Joanne Freeman about dueling. So listen to what she's saying. Because the song 10 Duel Commandments from the show is basically the Freeman rules of dueling. So you're listening to the word.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Maestro.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this was the question that started my interest in dueling is, you have a generation of people, very intelligent people, and somehow hundreds of them thought it made sense to go to a dueling ground and shoot at each other. Like, how does that make sense? So that, to me, was something really fascinating to figure out. And part of what you realize, for me, I realized that when I tracked when duels happened and when elections happened. And what I discovered among politicians, among other things, is these duels aren't about killing. And it's very hard to wrap your head around the fact that they're not actually very eager to kill each other. They're eager to prove that they're willing to die for their name and their honor. And which is why there's a lyric in that song, 10 Duel Commandments, most disputes die and no one shoots. Because this is how Hamilton is involved in 10 of these affairs of honor before the final duel. The point is to show you're willing to die for your honor, and then usually you can negotiate your way out, and Hamilton does that a lot of times. So the point actually isn't to get to the dueling ground, and then once you're at the dueling ground, the point is not to kill. So I don't think Burr was trying to kill Hamilton. There's a letter towards the end when his second says, should we bring a doctor? And Burr says, we don't need doctors, let's just get it over with. I don't think he was intending to kill. Hamilton announced to his friend before the duel that the first time they exchanged fire, he was not going to shoot at Burr. Now, that's interesting because if Burr had said honor is not satisfied and they had to exchange shots a second time, maybe Hamilton would have shot at him, I don't know. He did apparently put his glasses on, but that was like, I think, a psych-out maneuver, because duelists did that all the time, is that they would try and do something to kind of freak out the other guy. So he put on, they were going to fight the duel, and Hamilton said, wait, and in certain lights, I need glasses. And he put his glasses on, and essentially did this to Burr to kind of throw him off, right? I mean, I don't know if that was the best strategy, but that's, I think, what he was doing, you know? I think he meant what he said, that he wasn't going to shoot at Burr, but supposedly so he's shot, he falls, he's brought down into a rowboat and rowed back across to Manhattan. Supposedly, when he regained consciousness in the bottom of this rowboat, he said something along the lines of, be careful, the gun is loaded and it might go off. Wow. So it's unclear. Who knows? I mean, this is a guy who had been grievously shot and was lying on the bottom of a boat, but so it's unclear exactly what was happening in that moment. We still don't know. Hamilton second went back to the dueling ground to try and figure out, you know, and he found like a branch, and he said, look, Hamilton must have pointed his gun up because he shot a branch off a tree, but it's not absolutely known, and the 2 seconds never absolutely agreed on what happened on the dueling ground.
It depends on whom you ask, right? I've found there are Burr apologists who say that murderer Hamilton, he came to kill. And then
I don't think either one of them wanted to kill, but I think you only understand that if you understand dueling.
But there are T-shirts that used to show up at our show all the time that said Burr shot first.
Right.
Like real T-shirts, like a whole stage of people wearing Burr shot first T-shirts.
That's where we are, by the way. There are now Star Wars Founding Father mashup T-shirts.
That's it.
That's the point we're at. That's a good thing, I think.
It has struck such a chord. We're near the end of our program. I want to get some final thoughts. When you have people showing up with that type of T-shirt, Alex, let me start with you. You were back at the beginning. You've known Lynn since college, was his roommate. What is the final message? What do you think the legacy of the show will be? Because it's going to take a long time for everyone to be able to get tickets to see it.
Right. I like to think that there's a long game answer to that question. The real legacy of the show is in a generation of Broadway shows and films and pieces of music that are going to pop up 20, 30, 50 years from now from people who are seeing it now as kids. That's exciting because there are people now interested in telling personal stories people who have felt marginalized, who feel now a connection to American history in a way they never have, who see art as a means to tie those things together. That's exciting. You know, a more immediate legacy is that Joanne Freeman last week or a couple nights ago was in a Twitter fight with a troll who was
about Hamilton.
About Hamilton. This guy who was saying, no, you know, here's what Hamilton really meant here, and it escalated to a point where this guy said, yeah, well, you keep stealing your paycheck from Yale. He had no idea to whom he was speaking. Like, this is your life's work, and this guy was a nobody. But he was fighting on Twitter.
They're at the Twitter table.
They're at the Twitter table. And they're talking about the founding fathers.
I know more about
At least it was about something informative and educational. That's exciting. Those little stories pop up every day in a new way. The fact that we're here at the Bush Center talking about this well after the show opened is a good sign. The fact that every time I meet someone young who knows I have this connection to the show, they just light up and want to talk about, not, oh, I love that show, here's my favorite song. They want to talk about their favorite founding father. That's a rare moment. It ebbs and flows, it comes and goes, but it's a good moment to be at right now.
Joanne, please stay off of Twitter.
No,
she won, by the way. She won, hands down. She was right.
As a historian, the fact of what Alex just said, that this has permeated the culture, must be tremendously satisfying.
Well, so I'm gonna speak as a historian and a teacher, right? So I've done a lot of speaking in high schools, right? I immediately, as soon as it was clear that students loved this, I was suddenly, every school was like, we need a historian to talk about Hamilton. But what was remarkable is that I would get up on a stage and I would start talking, and I would get to various events and I could see the students mouthing the lyric that went along with whatever I was talking about, right? Now, to me, this is a starting point. Right? So this has gotten a whole generation of people fascinated with early American history, the founding. This is not the stopping point. This is the point where a teacher can say, okay, now that you're interested, let's talk about it. Like, what really happened, as opposed to a musical, what really happened? What are the ugly things we didn't see in the musical? What are the things that aren't there that we actually need to look at? I've never seen such interest. My students, sometimes I just say, I call it the H word, you know, I just have to say Hamilton, and the whole room is like, oh, Hamilton. So people are interested in this period in a way they haven't been before, and I think understand that it's not a foregone conclusion that whatever happened at that moment was going to happen at that moment. So to me as a teacher, it's the ultimate beginning to take advantage of this and teach with it and teach against it and teach past it, but use it, because I've never seen this kind of interest, and particularly early American history. I mean, that's not, you know, people usually were not jumping up and down to learn about early American history, so this is just, it's a sea change, I think, for students.
And Chris, a sea change for your life. Would you go back to it?
Sure. But quietly and only for a week.
Really?
You've thought this through, Chris.
I have. I saw the show 3 weeks ago for the first time, ever. I now have a list of things that I woke up the other night and wrote down something else from the show that I would love to explore. That I
Give us a hint?
No.
Okay.
No, never. But I would love to take another swing at it, but only 8 more swings. Because after doing theater for 21 years now, like, my biology is geared for 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like, 8 o'clock happens, I still start to sweat some nights. If I'm sitting on the couch, I start to think about the show, and my pulse rises, the adrenaline starts going. I have to go out and walk. Wow. Like, take a walk around the block. It happens. Wow. My wife calls me crazy. It happens when it's really cold outside. No, but I have to do that. But having watched it, I'd love to go take a swing at it. Mm-hmm. I would.
Was it what you expected when you sat out there?
Oh, it was so much more. It was so much more. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was happy that I got to tell Tommy and Lynn that, and just to You know, you can thank your brothers, because when you're brothers and you look out for each other and you love each other and you hang out and you're silly and you travel the world together and you do all this stuff, which I have with them. It's one thing to say it, but you're saying it without sort of the complete understanding of what you just saw your two best friends put together with you as a part of it, as a piece of it, but that could come from them is astounding to me. And if you haven't seen it, no, seriously, like, see it. You hit your neighbor in the leg and take their ticket. Everything short of that, like, go see it. It's a really important. It gives you access to many worlds that you may or may not have had access to, and it's the most tremendous thing that I've ever touched.
It speaks to you as an American, it speaks to you as a theater goer, it speaks to you as someone who loves musical theater. It hits everything that is beyond. And before we go, we have 20 theater students from Woodwall who are here. Where are you guys? Are you up there?
Hey!
High school theater students.
Stand up!
Stand up.
Yeah, stand up, you guys, so we can see you. There they are. All right, career advice.
Oh. Be the hardest worker you know. Be the most well-read person that you know. Be the most open and generous person that you know. You cannot have a career in the theater without all of those things. You cannot have a career in the theater without understanding how important it is to receive generosity and to be the recipient and to be the person who is lending a hand to someone. Theater, the act of theater is about being brave enough to not care about what you look like, but more about the story that you are compelled to tell. So practice those things now, and good luck discovering.
Well, it has been a very special and remarkable evening. I thank all of you for coming, and of course, Chris and Joanne and Alex. And if anyone who wants to come to New York, our son's in college, we got an extra room. You can stay if you want to see the show. I thank you. We again thank the Bush Center, and thank you for coming for this remarkable event that celebrates this remarkable work of art that will endure. Thank you.
Thank you for that absolutely wonderful discussion, and thanks to our great team here at the Bush Center for putting on another fantastic event. I want to encourage people who aren't members to see somebody in the hallway to become a member, because members will receive advance notice on our events. We are sold out for our next two events, the April 19th event with Bill Browder to talk about his book Red Notice, and on May 22nd, President Bush will talk about his art and his book, as well as celebrate some of our military service work. If you're not able to get a ticket to that, don't kneecap somebody, please, but you can watch it at bushcenter.org or on Facebook. And then tomorrow, Eric will be broadcasting the afternoon show on Fox News from the Bush Center. So we'll welcome him again tomorrow. And thank you all for being here. The museum will stay open for about another hour. And there's a wonderful exhibit from an emerging artist who you might want to take a peek at. So thank you all very much for being here tonight.
Control who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
President Jefferson, I'll give him this. His financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't undo it if I tried. And I tried.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
President Madison.
He took our country from bankruptcy